So now I'll introduce our three speakers. So I'm very pleased to introduce our fairly new chair of the Southwest Fed, Christina Broughton, who agreed to give this talk before she became chair. Christina is the partnership manager for Wessex Museums, which is a consortium of 4 museums across Dorset and Wiltshire. It's an MPO and a registered charity. Christina led the partnership team throughout the development and delivery of Hardy's Wessex. Harriet Still is one of the UK's leading experts on Thomas Hardy. She's a curator for the Wessex Museum's exhibition Hardy's Wessex, which you'll be hearing about today. And it's taking place simultaneously at Dorset Museum, Poole Museum, the Salisbury Museum and Wiltshire Museum. And then our final speaker is Lucy Johnston, who is the exhibitions manager at exhibitions officer, at Dorset Museum, which is home of the largest collection of Thomas Hardy objects in the world. Lucy was responsible for conceiving the original exhibition in 2015 and has been directly involved in the Hardy's Wessex collections loans and exhibition at Dorset Museum. So now I'd like to hand over to Christina, who's going to start our talk. Thanks, Christina.
Great, thanks, Iona, and hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me for just a moment. And we'll get this going. Okay, is that looking good? Okay, thank you, Iona. Well, hello, everyone. And it's great to be here as the new chair of the Southwest Fed. And a big welcome to all our members who are joining us today. Thank you for being here. But I'm also here with another hat, which is my day job. As partnership manager for Wessex Museums, and it's absolutely brilliant to be able to give this talk, which will share some of the outcomes to date of our most ambitious project to date. So I'm just going to start off by telling you a bit about Wessex Museums, because Hardy's Wessex very much starts with who we are as a partnership and as an organisation. So our vision is museums thriving through collaboration, and that really runs through everything we do. And what you're seeing here on screen is our partnership charter. And basically it tells you everything you need to know about the partnership and how we work as a group together. And as we move through the presentation today, I hope you will start to see how the values of our organisation, which you can see there, are reflected very much through the Hardy's Wessex project, particularly collaboration and innovation, but also that the opportunities that Hardy's Wessex as a project gave the partnership really reflect all those things you see in the opportunities box on screen. Certainly, it pushed us right out of our comfort zone. So what is special, I think, about Wessex Museums as a partnership and how that helped us to deliver Hardy's Wessex is that we're not just a partnership of separate museums that come together and do things, but actually we lead that collaborative work through a center point, which is Wessex Museums. And that center point, the context of that is what you're seeing here on screen. So our role really is about supporting and amplifying the work that the partner museums do. And we do that in 2 main ways. One is through sort of organizational support, which is the back end. So we work on strategy and policy, we provide training, we support with fundraising, all of those sort of back office organizational elements. But we also deliver front-end work. So we support the delivery of things like exhibitions, but any work that really benefits audiences and enhances the museum's offers. So we're really about the added value to what the museums do day by day. So that I think we're somewhere between being a supportive friend and a bit of a pushy parent. So hopefully that give you an idea about Wessex Museums. A bit about our history. I mean, the partnership's been going for about 10 years, and I think it's really important to recognize that because actually we had done a lot of work together before we came to delivering something like Hardy's Wessex. So before 2012, I mean, the museums know each other well and have worked together informally for even more than 10 years. But in 2012, the Wessex 3, as we'll call it, so that was Dorset County Museum, which is now Dorset Museum, Salisbury Museum and Wiltshire Museum, got a bit of Arts Council money to do a project looking at their shops, I think it was, so income generation project. And then Dorset Museum and Poole Museum also delivered quite a significant exhibition together and with other venues across the region called My Sporting Life, which was part of the 2012 Olympics. So there was already this developing experience in the partnership, growing from that point. In 2014, the partnership first formally established through a sort of memorandum of understanding. And actually, we went for a major partner museum bid for 2015 to 17, but that was unsuccessful. Instead, we ended up with some resilience funding in 2015 for a 2-year project. And that project, I call it the navel gazing project, because it really was about looking inwards and building the foundations for what is now Wessex Museums as an organization, those things I just showed you. So that was really important work to work out what our values were, how we were going to work together, what sorts of things we wanted to do. And then in 2017, off the back of that work, we established the Wessex Museums Trust, which is our registered charity. And we turned outward at that point after our navel gazing to do what we called a Spotlight Loans program. And the principle of that was to do something across all 4 museums, where a very simple principle: one object from each museum went on tour throughout a year to all 4 of the museums. And actually, it was just a real test bed for us of how we could do something small scale together, touring objects, focusing on collections, and looking at sharing audiences, marketing, all those sorts of things. So again, laying some groundwork for some of the work you'll see in Hardy. And then the big change for us came in 2018 when we were awarded our MPO funding. And within our bid, Hardy's Wessex was absolutely the showpiece of that application. So why a partnership exhibition and why Hardy's Wessex? Well, I mean, I think there's several answers to this. As I've just outlined, we developed all this experience, and it was always that Hardy's Wessex felt like the thing we were kind of born to do as a partnership. And the map sums it up, because this Hardy's Wessex is our Wessex, it's our region. And not only that, but of course, our partner Dorset Museum, as you've just heard, holds this absolutely incredible world-class collection about Thomas Hardy. Much of it was unseen, some of it needing conservation. So it just felt like this amazing opportunity to really showcase and celebrate that collection as well. We knew that we share audiences, but we thought that was something we could build on. So we wanted to test how far we could go in actually moving our audiences from one venue to another. So by doing an exhibition in more than one venue. We also wanted to explore the potential of touring an exhibition that was homegrown from our museum's collections. And because Hardy had a national appeal, has an international appeal really, this was something we could explore through this exhibition, using the practicalities we learned from delivering it in our own venues. And Harriet might say more about the tour in her presentation. And then finally, we wanted to see if actually doing these homegrown exhibitions offered value for money. So in terms of economies of scale, commercial impact, and environmental sustainability. Oh, sorry, hit something there. So I know everyone will be interested in the money and the resources for this exhibition. So let's just get this out of the way straight away. So our overall budget for the exhibition was £235,000. It's a whopper. But I, just want to frame that was for all 4 museums, and that budget included all of the staff resources that were funded to support this exhibition, other than the staff in the partner museums. It also included all of the associated programming and marketing, so not just the exhibition itself. So that worked out to about £59,000 per museum. And then we had quite a steep fundraising target of £75,000, which for an organization who hadn't done hardly any fundraising was quite a big ask. We actually didn't quite meet that target, but we did raise around 70,000, which we're very pleased with. And we have delivered the entire exhibition for just over £230,000. So in terms of the delivery team and the contractors, which you can see there on screen, these were absolutely critical for delivering this very ambitious project. And as I said, those were, for the most part, all included in that overall budget figure. The exceptions were the student placements, which came to us fully funded from our university partners, and the Central Wessex team. So that included the marketing officer, the fundraising officer. These are colleagues in my team who are funded by the MPO, but from a separate pot in the MPO, if you like. And also not funded, not in the budget figure, were the partner museum curators and volunteers and exhibition officers. You can also see right in the middle of the screen, we collaborated with a huge amount of other organizations across the region. And without that central resource, I don't think that would have been possible, because all of you, I'm sure in the audience who've done any form of partnership work, know how resource hungry it can be. So actually that central resource really helped us to extend our collaboration. So there's absolutely no denying that our MPO funding for the partnership is what made Hardy's Wessex possible. But in terms of the cash for the exhibition itself, but more importantly, that central team, which added that layer of resource capacity. And just to give you a flavor of the exhibition timeline, I mean, as Iona said in the introduction, the idea went right back to 2015, but the exhibition itself from there was really 3 years in the making, and we had a year of COVID stuck in there for good measure. So actually the exhibition was supposed to happen in 2021, and we had to put it back a year. We started scoping in 2019. Our major collaborations didn't start until 2021, as we were kind of in and out of lockdowns. So that was fairly complicated, as was our initial formative evaluation. That was in and out of lockdown. So a lot of work done online. And we eventually, after a full start, tendered our contract for design and build in 2021. And there's a lovely picture of some of the team there, including myself, at the opening at Salisbury Museum in May, when we look all very happy there. But actually, what that photo doesn't show, I think, is the absolute exhaustion and relief that we had made it to that day, as any exhibition install is complicated and intense. Doing it across 4 venues is extremely challenging. And not only that, but we did 4 private views over 2 days, in addition to press interviews, tours for patrons, and so on. In fact, in that picture, I actually had no voice, which is not ideal for talking to loads of people at a private view. And finally, it's quite unbelievable to think that this exhibition, after all of this work over so many years with so many people, will close in just over a week's time. So apologies for anyone who was hoping to see it today at Dorset Museum, but I encourage you to go. It is on in 4 venues: Salisbury, Wiltshire, Poole and Dorchester. So you have an opportunity over the next week and a bit to go along. So hopefully that's given you a sort of set the theme for the project itself. And I'm now going to just hand over to my wonderful colleagues who were really working at the coalface throughout the project to share their experiences of Hardy's Wessex, starting with Harriet Still, our fabulous curator. Harriet. Harriet, you need to unmute.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be looking a bit more about the actual creation of the exhibition. So I suppose that point between 2019 and delivery in 2022, which some of it will overlap with Lucy's points, but also hopefully give you a bit more about the kind of overarching organisation, logistics, resourcing that we did in those 3 years leading up to it. So if I can have the next slide, please. So here I've just kind of laid out the steps that we went through towards creating the exhibition. Initially, we had to do object surveys, and of course these were across 4 different museums, collections, plus Dorset Museum's holding is also in Dorset History Centre. So we had kind of 5 venues to go and scope out the objects there and select from those objects things that were particularly relevant to Hardy and we felt were particularly significant objects in themselves, but also looking through the partners' exhibitions, because as Christina said, we felt that we really wanted this to be a homegrown exhibition and test how far you could go with creating a homegrown exhibition where the objects were majority sourced from our own collections rather than getting in loans. This was also something we were quite keen on from a sustainability point of view, to be reducing the amount of transport needed to get loans over to Wessex. We've also got the forming partnerships, which Christina just mentioned, but we had many partnerships throughout the process, some of which came to fruition, others didn't. But it was an amazing journey, and we've got some amazing collaborative pieces that contributed to the exhibition out of those partnerships. The research obviously was a huge part of this. I have a history of working with Hardy, so I felt I was already quite well placed. But of course, the amount of research that you need to do to go into objects and getting the details right on little tiny things that you would never have thought of before, as you will all know from creating your own exhibitions. But on an area like Hardy, obviously, it's so well known worldwide. And so we drew on a lot of expertise there. There was the writing of the exhibition interpretation itself, and also the writing of the guidebook, which I'll mention later, conservation work that came up as we were going, the actual design process, which we worked with external designers, the loans. We did actually get 4 very significant loans through Western Loans Association, but these were also supplemented. We did kind of give in and get 2 loans from further afield, and then 2 very local loans that we felt enhanced the stories that we wanted to tell. The logistics of actually bringing everything together. We found that, as Christina said, putting on 4 exhibitions simultaneously was something that we really wanted to do, to give that impact and to test whether having these 4 simultaneous exhibitions reinforce the marketing across the 4 partners. But it was a massive logistical challenge to get them all up at the same time and effectively be doing the same thing in 4 separate places simultaneously. So I'll talk a bit more about that as well. Alongside the exhibition, we created a guidebook, which is a 64-page guidebook, which is still available for sale if you haven't got one already. And we also created an events and engagement program that sat alongside the exhibition when it was in those delivery stages between May this year and next week. And then the last bit I needed to acknowledge is that we did evaluation as well. We did formative evaluation with our target audiences, and now we're wrapping up doing summative evaluation, and we also did evaluation throughout the project with our staff across the 4 partners to test how our aims of working together collaboratively and that bringing about feelings of greater unity and also of kind of an ownership of the project were felt throughout. So if we can have the next slide, please. So first of all, looking at the partnerships, from the beginning of this project, we felt it was about partnership working. This was obviously because we are a partnership in ourselves. The very nature of it was working across the 4 museums and also with Dorset History Centre. But we also extended this to include many other stakeholders. As I said, Hardy is a massively influential figure in the Southwest, and so there are many stakeholder groups that were interested in being involved in this. And so we were engaging with them, as well as wanting to engage further to support the activity we wish to come out of this project. The year extension of lockdown, although you'll see in later slides that it proved problematic in some areas, actually gave us a huge opportunity to work with greater partnerships that we couldn't have imagined before. Firstly, we wanted to work, as I said, with academic institutions to get that expertise needed for the research. So through this, we worked with Exeter University, academic staff from Bishop Grosseteste University, from St Andrews University, and also from other independent academics. We also worked with the Thomas Hardy Society and students and volunteers, and together this brought about this amazing research which contributed to the writing of the interpretation. For our events and engagement programme, this was probably one of the greatest number of partnerships. We worked with national organisations like the National Trust, who own Hardy's Cottage, Maxgate, and we also worked with the Ramblers to create a series of walks across 8 different locations tied into the 4 different venues that we were displaying the exhibition at. We worked with young people in our formative evaluation to help form our events and engagement programme. And one of the things that came out of that was a desire for workshops tied into themes and crafts that came up and linked to the exhibitions. And so for that, we engaged with local artists and craftspeople to create a programme which fulfilled the evaluation targets we'd initially identified. We also had student placements who helped us with a podcast series, amongst other things. And also, as Christina briefly mentioned, local cinema. We did 2 successful screenings of Far From the Madding Crowd, which not only were kind of sold out, but apparently could have been sold another 2 times over. And we worked with local heritage sites and museums, 8 different sites that were identified across the Wessex region, to create satellite displays related to Hardy. And finally, to youth organisations, where we worked with young farmers to help develop the walking routes that we were developing with Ramblers Association. For the creative elements, and I think this probably is the real partnership that came out of that extra year from lockdown, we were able to work with Arts University Bournemouth. And this was incredible because we were able to work with 3 different departments to create active elements of the exhibition. Another thing that was identified in our formative evaluation was the desire to have more interactive and immersive elements of the exhibition. And so we went to Arts University Bournemouth, who have a brilliant performance design and costume department, but also have interior architecture and a graphic design course. And we worked with them to create 3 different response pieces to each of the exhibitions in the 4 venues. And this was an incredible experience. We were working with students who largely didn't know who Thomas Hardy was, let alone anything about his literature. And so there was a whole series there of creating lectures to brief them, and then working to develop briefs to set parameters in terms of the physical design of the pieces, and then to work with them in feedback ongoing and also in their evaluation. And finally, we had the partnerships which helped with our publicity and getting a wider reach and wider impact. And this included having a student placement who worked on our publicity, but also working with local libraries across Dorset and Wiltshire to create a reader development opportunity where we had a booklet encouraging people to read Thomas Hardy novels. And this was developed again with another student placement and also with a local book group. So lots and lots of different partnerships. And if I could have the next slide, Christina. This gives an idea, you won't be able to read it obviously, but this gives an idea of how many different partnerships we were working with by about 2021. And then if Christina flips over to the next slide, you'll see how it all kind of merges, grows. I have to apologise for the lines right in the centre, which I don't know quite how they connected up. But I think this was quite good at summarising the experience of partnership working, just to never imagine that just reaching out to one partner is going to be a kind of simple, straightforward thing. Quite often you'll reach out to a partner, have lots of conversations that are very exciting, but ultimately it doesn't come to fruition. But then there are other partnerships which not only grow and successfully take root, but actually link into other things and kind of cross-pollinate and come together. And I think that's quite a good summary of what we found with Hardy, that the partnerships were really, really crucial to the end product of the exhibition, but also take a huge amount of work and coordination and management. And I think that was only really possible with this project by having the central dedicated team working on the exhibition across all 4 museums across such a wide area. Can I have the next slide, please? So then going on to the object survey, and we had hundreds of objects to look through. Like I said, we had the 4 museums collections across 5 different sites. And the challenge of this was really the volume. We had quite a good number of spreadsheets of the Hardy collection, but it hasn't yet been properly catalogued. The Dorset History Centre are currently doing a campaign to fundraise for the proper cataloguing of it all. So if you're interested, please do contribute, because it will make people like my lives a lot easier in future. And so just assessing that was quite a challenge. And then also accessing the collections geographically, because we were spread across Salisbury, Devizes, Dorset and Poole, and so getting regular access and going and visiting something, then getting home and realizing that you hadn't gone and looked at the other thing that you were meant to. It had to all be very, very properly planned. Obviously, lockdown was a massive challenge because we couldn't actually access the collections for about a year. And also the capital project at Dorset Museum has produced a wonderful museum, but obviously created a lot of movement and recanting and decanting of objects over that period. And so tracking the locations of objects became a really kind of key part of our management. In terms of successes, I just want to do a big shout out for Art UK, Watercolour World and the Wiltshire collections online. Salisbury are now online as well, but weren't at the time. But these 3 resources made my life incredibly easy during lockdown, because I was able to access really high quality images and dimensions of objects remotely. The fact that we'd also had this huge database of very high quality images taken for Art UK and Watercolour World also meant that we had high quality images that we could draw from our own collections on the graphic panels. And so in the whole of the exhibition, I think we paid for maybe about 8 different images from stock photography. And so highly recommend it. It may be a huge amount of time invested initially, but it really does pay off. Lessons learnt were definitely track all your objects in a spreadsheet. Make sure you know where everything is, especially if you've got capital projects going on or lockdown, or you're trying to access disparate collections. And also photograph and measure everything. Never think I might not use it, so I won't do it now, because it always pays off later to have those details for it just in case. So moving on to the next slide. With the research, we ended up working with 13 academics across 5 different academic institutions, 4 PhD students and 3 placement students. And that had a huge impact on the quality and rigour of our academic research and backing to the interpretation. We also work with the Thomas Hardy Society, who have an amazing fount of knowledge there, and who read through a lot of the interpretation to make sure that we had got everything right. Next slide, please. We ended up wanting to work with a professional design company because we were working across 4 different sites to get this professional, unified and coherent design language. And this is something that, although some of our partners did have in-house skills, they didn't have the time or the resource to spare them, or other places that had more time didn't have the skills. And so having that professional design company across all 4 really did help pull together a professional looking coherent design and branding across all 4. Next slide, please. But at the same time, the challenges were working across 4 very varied spaces, which often the designers would have a day to measure. And so we were quite often having to put a lot of input into making sure that the spaces were properly acknowledged in the designs. Which I think is always going to be a problem with remote working with designers. And also the install was a huge challenge across the 4 different sites, which even with a professional company, we ended up having a lot of staffing to support them on that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that also one of the amazing successes was that the designers agreed to work with the students that we were working with from AUB, and so we had an amazing skills exchange there as well. And the lessons learned are that communication and in-person knowledge of space are key. And so I think in future we may not work with a whole design company, but actually focus on the 2-dimensional graphic elements that we are really lacking in-house. Next slide, please. And that ties into the logistics. We also wanted to draw on the design company's project management, but actually we found that when it came to it, our project manager in our team filled a lot of those roles, and she was really the person who kind of drove everything forward. and brought together these kind of multiple elements and multiple systems and processes across 5 collections. In this, spreadsheets and Google Drive were absolutely crucial. And I'd say it's very key to good logistics to have that clear allocation of responsibilities and contingency budget, and also to have someone who can pull everything together and kind of herd everyone along as you go. Next slide, please. Conservation, the exhibition allowed us to identify several objects. We had, I think, 42 objects in total that received conservation work as a result of this across all 4 museums. And that meant that we were able to centrally apply for funding, which the individual museums would have been duplicating to do individually. And we're able to get professional conservators and mount makers to then work on these objects. Next, please. The loans, as I said, we had 4 significant Western loans, which is part of the Art Fund Western Loans Grant Scheme. And these were Tesla d'Urberville's manuscript, Jude the Obscure manuscript, a Constable painting, and Thomas Webster's Village Choir from the Victoria and Albert Museum. And this again was through being able to work jointly on those funding bids. Next slide, please. And as I said, we did give in and have a few more loans, but only 4. Next slide. We also produced a catalogue, although we were very keen right from the beginning that this would be through a guidebook format to be more accessible and open to our younger audiences we were targeting. Next slide, please. And we had an events programme that ran alongside this, which Lucy will tell you a bit more about on the ground, that included workshops, talks, film screenings, and activities. Next slide. And I think the interesting things we found from these were that free events lacked perceived value. Income generating workshops did surprisingly well in spite of our fears. Partnership online talks did very well, and we should have arranged more. Counterintuitively, partnership-wide joint talks were not as well attended as in-person single museum talks. The benefits of working with other less resource partners to create feelings of coherence and unity across the local heritage sector, I think, was very valuable, which came out of our work with smaller heritage sites across the region. Next slide, please. And just to recap the whole exhibition so far, we're still having our figures coming in, but we've had 42 objects across the 4 partners. We engaged with 200 university students, because apart from the 120 Christina mentioned, we also had another 70 who are in the cohort this year doing another project inspired by our work with them. We had the podcast series Interrogating Hardy, which has been listened to across 13 countries. And the Wessex Museums programme has been attended by over 400 attendees already. As of the 1st of October, we had 23,871 visitors who had seen the exhibitions across all 4 sites. Thank you very much.
So Lucy, if you'd like to unmute and take it from here about the partner museum experience of the exhibition.
Yes, I'd love to, Christina. I think we're going to try and run through this because a lot of it is sort of overlapping a bit with Harriet. So if I sort of run through the slides quite quickly so we have time for questions. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the partner museum perspective, and as Harriet has outlined, it's been a major project involving close working and collaboration across Dorset Museum with all of its challenges. But what I really wanted to highlight, and it comes from Christina's presentation at the beginning, was the value to us as a museum of putting on a major exhibition with this external funding. It meant that we could sort of do what we wanted, where we wanted, and add bits on. So we're really grateful to Wessex Museum and the Arts Council to help us realise this exhibition. Now, the next slide, please. Right, so the key objective, or one of the key objectives for us, was partner museums developing cross-partnership working. The partner museums are Dorset Museum, Poole Museum, Salisbury Museum, and Wiltshire Museum, as Christina explained. And we've all worked together, as we saw in the first presentation, on partnership loans, but they tend to be very small scale. So this was going to be quite a big new venture for us. And Dorset Museum was selected as the lead museum because obviously we had most of the collections. And Harriet was amazing working with us for all those years with all the challenges that she's outlined. I'm just going to go on to the next slide now because I'm going to start outlining some of those particular challenges that we faced. So we had over 200 loan objects to 3 partner museums, together with an exhibition at Dorset Museum. Now, some of these objects were at the Dorset History Centre, but they're owned by us. So we had to do all the condition reporting and everything that went with it. So some of the work that was involved, which Harriet did with our team of collections assistants and did an amazing job, were measuring everything, doing preliminary condition assessments. And I can't say how important Harriet was talking about measuring and taking photographs, but make sure that you just do a really thorough condition assessment when you're looking at objects, because we found this with this exhibition and others, that you might not look at the frame of the picture, and then you come to look at the object again and you think, oh my goodness, that frame needs work, and it adds on to your budget. So that's one of the big lessons that I've learned. And then they collated all of the objects, which was that was quite a feat. And freezing. Now, always go for the unexpected, always leave more time, because halfway through the project we found our rural collections had woodworm, so we had to hire a freezer, put everything in the freezer. It was a big mobile freezer, take it out, and that added on quite a lot to the project. Documentation, obviously really important for an exhibition of this scale, updating locations, packing, conservation, framing, transport, which is another cost that can really add up on these exhibitions, especially if you're using fine art transporters. And finally, installation. Next slide, please. I'm just going to talk through some of the challenges for us as Dorset Museum. We had a major redevelopment project from 2019 to 2021, which was basically rebuilding our museum. So we had to decant all of our collections into other stores. On top of this, we had COVID, which meant that we couldn't actually work in the stores together very much, or we couldn't really liaise face to face with the partner museums. But it did mean that we sort of learnt new ways, like through Zoom. So it kind of was quite creative as well. And also, when the new museum was built last year, all the objects were moved, a lot of the objects were moved out of their stores into the new museum. So this updating of locations of the Hardy objects was quite a challenge. Luckily, a lot of them were placed at the Dorset History Centre. So that really helped. And we also had a new museum Hardy gallery in the museum. So we had a concern for us that we were going to be overdoing Hardy in the museum. So I think the exhibition that Harriet created for us was really successful, because we had our Hardy gallery showing his life, and then in the exhibition people could look sort of deeper down into the layers of his beliefs about animal rights and war. So I just wanted to talk about logistics. Next slide, please. This looks a bit like the London Underground map, but it's just to show you where most of our work took place as a museum. This is just for us as a museum. Every museum would have had their own mapping. So the blue lines show the objects that we collated and then we loaned to partner museums. So, for example, they came from the Dorset History Centre to Dorset Museum. That's where the archive was. And then we collated the archive with our objects to go off to the partner museums. The pink arrows are objects that went to the framers and conservators. The green arrows show the objects coming back to us or going to the partner museums ready for installation. And the orange arrows are loans in to the museum. So you can see there's quite a lot of activity going on there. And I just wanted to illustrate that with 2 object journeys. Next slide, please. So this is a letter. This is our first object journey. It's a letter from William Morris to Thomas Hardy. So it was held in the archive of the Dorset History Centre. Then it was taken to Dorset Museum. Then it went to the framers, and then it went to Wiltshire Museum Devises. And it's got to do the journey all the way back, missing out the framers when we deinstall the exhibition. Next slide, please. And this is Jemima Hardy, Hardy's mother's shawl, which was held at Dorset Museum, and it went to the conservator at Exeter, who repaired and mounted it. And then it came back to Dorset Museum, and then it went to Salisbury Museum. And it didn't just go on its own, it went with a lot of other objects as well. Next slide, please. And as Christina outlined, we were very fortunate to be able to borrow this amazing painting from the Victoria and Albert Museum, which really enhanced the exhibition at the museum, because it actually showed the sort of characters that Hardy talked about in his writing. And what was also amazing was that everything was paid for, from conservation, display preparation, packing, crating. You know, we did have to send them graphs of our gallery environmental conditions. So we're very specific about that. And obviously we had to very carefully, you can see all the marks on it. We've had to very carefully condition check it, both on install and deinstall. But it's been amazing. Our visitors have loved it. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about installation. We were sent exhibition layout plans along with the other museums, and also we had graphics plans. Next slide, please. And I think for us, I think it's one of the challenges of working across 4 venues with designers that are working remotely. It did make sort of planning for install more challenging, but because we've worked on previous projects, we've had that direct communication with the designer, and a project of this scale, it just wasn't possible. So I think it sort of created more layers. Probably Harriet and Joe with us pestering them with all these questions, but it was the nature of such a big project, we had to do it that way. Next slide, please. I think one of the most successful outcomes for us have been these amazing installations by the Arts University Bournemouth. And on the right, you have a projection of one of the students with lovely sound effects. And on the left, you have a dressing up area. And they've been really popular with visitors. All right, I'm just going to skate through our visitor figures. Next slide, please. Here are some comments from visitors written in the visitor books that were in the exhibition. And I think if you look at them, you could see how much people were actually gaining from this exhibition. And it was kind of the element of surprise as well. They find things they didn't expect. Like they didn't expect to find war horses in an exhibition on Thomas Hardy. And we had 6,000 visitors to the exhibition between May and October. We feel that a high proportion of our main museum visitors also visited the exhibition. And we feel that actually it was due to COVID and the cost of living crisis. We don't feel as if the exhibition reached its full potential in terms of visitor numbers and engagement, but the people who were engaged were really engaged. So I'm going to talk a little bit about press and marketing. We had amazing help from Wessex Museums with our press and marketing programme. They created these amazing leaflets for us, which we distributed around Dorchester and surrounding towns. And we also sent out press releases, and we got some really good coverage from local news. We had social media. We've posted regular social media activity on the exhibition. And we had these highlight days, and Thomas Hardy and the Pets were really, really popular.
Struggling.
Sorry? Can you hear me? Yeah. And then if we just move on to the shop, we developed a range of bespoke materials for the exhibition, including hardy scented candles.
Sorry, it might be my end.
Hardy scented candles with the sort of scent of his study, the exhibition catalogues. We feel actually a lesson learned could be that we had more coordination across the partnership between what we sold and sort of sharing ideas. We feel that would be a good thing to take forward with future exhibitions. Next slide, please. And we had a very varied exhibitions events program. Harriet, as she said, gave some amazing in-person, online talks and exhibition tours. And she gave some lovely training talks for our gallery stewards as well, which were really popular. Next slide, please. And we had a recent members event for our members of Dorset Museum at Salisbury Museum, where Harriet took them around the gallery and then showed them the cathedral and how it inspired Hardy's poetry, which was a really popular day. Next slide, please. And we had commercial events with Tim Laycock, who did his Fireside Tales for younger visitors, and also a whole series of art workshops, which have been really successful that we've taken these forward. They were run by Helen Garrett. So we've developed these, and she's doing various workshops for us across the museum. So that was a really nice legacy of the project. And I'm then just going to talk about learning and engagement. So we had a wide range of learning, from unguided school visits to family drop-in artifact sessions in a very safe and engaging space. And they did lovely things like making silhouettes, little theatres, and birds cut up from old books, not Hardy original books, but we suspended these in the windows of the museum. And I'm just going to quickly wrap up with just saying what our experience was. It's been really great doing this talk, because it's helped me reflect on our experience of what the challenges were and the successes. So I'd say the challenges were opening at 4 museums simultaneously, as I've shown, coordinating objects and loans, and also widening our audience. That was one of the key aims, and it was more difficult due to the economic crisis. And also the challenge of a Hardy exhibition in an area where there was already a lot of information about Hardy through Max Gate and Hardy's Cottage. And just finally, the positives, which were, it was a really enriching experience for visitors, and the exhibition enabled us to work with students and create new partnerships. Also, it was sustainable financially, and also it shared skills. I think it's helped us go a step beyond our kind of partnership working that we were doing before, and taking our experience of lending and shared marketing one step further. And we look forward to working with future projects with Wessex Museum in the future. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to all 3 speakers, and congratulations on delivering such an ambitious and challenging project. I think it really shows that Wessex Museum's partnership is leading the way in terms of partner exhibitions. And we've had quite a few questions through in the chat, so we might not get through all of them. We've got about 10 minutes left of the session, but I'll sort of take them in order of appearance. So the first question, it sounds like you engage with a wide range of partnerships surrounding the exhibition. Which ones were the most successful and why? Were there any unexpected or particularly fruitful collaborations which may be ongoing? So jump in, whoever wants to answer that one.
I think probably it's just reinforcing what Lucy just said about the Arts University Bournemouth, which came about because Poole Museum were working with them on our museum project, and that was led by Alex Reynolds, who's worked previously with looking more widely nationally at university collaborations with heritage organisations. And so we started off just wanting to fulfill some of the kind of immersive interactive elements, and actually it grew a lot bigger. And I think the really surprising thing that came out of that was the Kira Bennett that you saw in one of Lucy's pieces, which was an audiovisual art installation. And what's lovely with that is she's now going on and working more with heritage organisations, and she's going to be touring the 4 pieces of artwork that she did as part of our Swindon tour in 2023. So she's very, very pleased with the outcome as well.
Fantastic. That sounds like a real success story. Christina or Lucy, did you want to add anything, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay. So the next question's about audiences.
Sorry, can I just say,
asking...
I think our partnership with the Dorset History Centre is absolutely amazing. I mean, they have gone above and beyond. They're not part of the Wessex Partnership, but in terms of their conservation at very reasonable prices, all their collation, things came in beautiful portfolios. They were absolutely incredible.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We're here.
Yeah, I had experience of working with them as well when I worked on the Shire Hall project, and they were absolutely fantastic, really helpful and very amenable. Yeah, so the next question is around audiences. So how was the spread of audiences monitored, and how many people, which is a burning question I have as well, how many people travel between all 4 sites?
Shall I take this one, Harriet? You can jump in. I mean, we don't know the answer yet because we're still collating the data. So the way we're tracking that is through 2 means. We, as an MPO, we are required to collect surveys on visitors to our museums generally. So we use Audience Finder provided by the Audience Agency, and that will track postcodes. But also within that survey, we have a bespoke question, which is about whether people have visited one of our other partner museums. So we're tracking that way. We're also tracking through postcode data through what's called an impact and insight survey, which sits in our galleries and is very specific to the exhibition itself. And the third way, and probably the key way we've tracked visitors moving from one venue to another, is we put in place a loyalty card scheme as part of the exhibition. So a bit like when you go to a coffee house and you get a little card and they stamp it every time you get a latte. Well, this way, every time you go to a museum, you get a stamp. And when you complete all 4 museums, you get a little gift, but also we offered a discount at each of the follow-on venues. So you pay full price at the first venue and then a discount as you go around. So we're collecting in the cards. So we will know how many did all 4, how many did 3, how many did 2, and so on. So but I don't have the numbers at this point because obviously we're not done and we haven't collated the data. So you'll have to watch this space, but we will be obviously compiling a report, which we will put on our website in due course.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question about visitor numbers. So how do the visitor numbers to the Hardy exhibition compare to exhibitions that each individual museum has had in the past? And has Hardy helped drive more visits than you would normally get?
Lucy, you might want to add to this as the museum partner here, but I'll just introduce it in that I think it's really hard to compare, not only because of the nature of this exhibition, but because of the time it's fallen. And as Lucy highlighted in her presentation, it kind of landed in the middle of the cost of living crisis, still quite strange coming out of COVID. And I'm sure others here are experiencing this in their own organizations. But also, we had to find a way to deal with the fact that one of our museums doesn't charge, our other museums do charge, and how and they all charge different amounts, and how that would operate in practice. So we had a number of challenges. So I think, you know, the numbers are lower than we would have hoped. And if I were to compare it back to the last partnership exhibitions we did, which were Augustus John and Henry Lamb, and those were across 2 venues, Salisbury and Poole Museum, the numbers are lower, significantly lower. So, but it's hard at the moment for us to pinpoint exactly why that is. I think what I'm trying to look at more broadly is actually the offer. So not just the numbers through the door, and I appreciate that is incredibly important in terms of the museum's financial sustainability and the commercial impact of this exhibition, but actually we had a much broader offer around our events and engagement program, and we have generated income from that as well as a partnership, which was unexpected. So there have been additional benefits. Lucy, do you want to say a bit about how it's landed at Dorset Museum?
Yeah, as I said, I think it's been people have been very positive in their comments, both online and in the visitor book, but it's a bit difficult for us because we also opened the new museum in May 2021. So we had a huge influx of visitors in the first year. So it might be part of that as well, that the visitors, you know, they come and see the new museum and they tend to drop off a bit in the second year. So that, combined with the cost of living crisis and COVID, probably didn't help. But I think, what I will say is a large proportion of people who came to the museum also went to the exhibition as well. So I think it was a sort of, I think everybody's experience is, all the different curators I've spoken to across the museum network, that in the last 6 months, visitor figures have dropped generally.
I think we may have lost Iona. She
Lovely,
looks
thank you.
frozen. Oh, you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, just about.
Great. Sorry, unstable connection. Great. The next question is quite a nice question, actually. If you had a surprise 20K, what would you have spent it on? Did you hear that?
Yes, I'm going to let my colleagues answer that one.
I don't know, that's such a tricky one, because on the one hand you want to say, oh, I would, do something really incredible and creative. I think actually probably for me it would be I think one of the challenges we had is because the collections are so important. It was quite a challenge to mount, frame and case all of the objects to the extent that we needed to. And so I think that actually 20K could quite be very, very tempting just to put into being able to put more objects onto display, which I would have loved to have done.
It would have bought 2
Fantastic,
showcases,
thank you.
wouldn't it?
Right, well, we've reached the 2 o'clock mark. Everyone can hear me. And I've just put a final slide on the screen, which is about our next event, which is another online event. It is on the 17th of November from 1 to 2 p.m. again, and it's from a consortium of different organisations in Bath, talking about the Bath and Colonialism newspaper project, which is a really interesting project. You can see the link on screen to book that. And also I'll just share the survey chat, and be really grateful if everyone can complete our survey, which you'll also get in a follow-up email. So just to say thank you everyone for joining us, and yeah, hope to see you again in November. Also watch this space because we are organising a special Christmas social event, which we haven't quite got up onto our website yet, but it will be up there this week. So that's going to be on the 8th of December. And rather like the Wessex Museums Partnership, it's going to happen in 2 locations simultaneously, because we're trying to encourage members from the north of the region. So there'll be one event just outside Bristol, and then from the south of the region, so there'll be one just outside Plymouth. So they'll both be at National Trust properties, quite exciting. We'll get to see their Christmas experiences and hear from their conservators and property managers, get behind the scenes tours. So watch this space, pencil it in, 8th of December, next online 17th of November. Hope to see you again soon, and thanks for coming. Bye.